Imperial indicated attendance. Mr. Speaker, honored judges, ladies and gentlemen. We think that after World War II, the West got together to collectively rebuild Japan's economy. We think they failed to rebuild its culture. Certain attitudes were allowed to persist and who's poisoned domestic politics in Japan to this day, making an obstacle to meaningful geopolitics in the region and creating a moral dissonance between the good work Japan seeks to do in the world and the attitude to promulgate domestically to its own population. We say we have three reasons that we are going to do this. So first, we think there is a moral legitimacy of doing this in terms of the way in which blame should accurately be displayed towards all those who participated in Japan's military machine during the war in the Pacific in World War II. Second, we say that in domestic political terms, it's useful for us to do this in order to remove certain barriers to different things that we would like to achieve domestically. But most importantly, we think, in some ways, because most of those directly concerned are dead, we're happy not to consider this to some extent in consequentialist debates. We say that geopolitics in the region require this barrier to be removed from Japan's natural allies, the United States, and key allies in the region, such as South Korea and the Philippines, who will never cooperate with Japan until they acknowledge the moral capability of their soldiers during World War II. What are we doing? So, not only will Shinzo Abe no longer visit the Yasukuni war shrine, we will demolish the Yasukuni war shrine and salt the earth upon which it's built. Not only will we issue an apology for the rape of Nanking and similar atrocities committed in the Pacific during World War II, but we will in fact write about our culpability in the textbooks of Japan, so Japan's next generation will learn about our guilt. We are happy enough to extend this apology and acceptance of culpability to all those who fought in the Japanese armed services, whether or not they were conscripted to do so. Though note, Mr. Speaker, most of them were volunteers. Why is that this is legitimate? So we say that the perverse culture of combining Bushido with modern warfare was necessarily a totalizing force within Japanese military psychology. We say that each individual Japanese soldier did not consider himself an individual. He considered himself a member of a collective whole. It is that collective whole that committed atrocities. It is therefore consistent with the mentality they brought to the table that they conceived of themselves under to extend culpability to them. Because note that those kinds of ideologies can only persist when it is the case that all members mutually support each other in the notion that the Emperor is not a man like you and I, but is in fact a divine being whose commandments are absolute. They tell themselves that the people they are fighting against are not human beings like themselves, but are inferior racially and morally to the Japanese people. That is how they are able to overcome their inherent moral inaction towards atrocities like rape. Because necessarily the ideological construction they adopted during World War II told them that they were morally superior. We say even those who did not themselves commit crimes bought into this culture. We say that those people who were willing to fly planes into boats, who were willing to destroy themselves in the name of killing the enemy, necessarily bought into a culture that said, I am not an individual, and in fact the enemy is someone who is not worthy of my moral concern. So we say therefore that someone who is inculcated into that culture necessarily accepts the blame which falls upon the actions of all. And furthermore, we think that it is entirely legitimate we do so because it creates a distance for further ideologies such as this arising in the future. So, why do we think this is particularly useful in terms of domestic politics? So first, we think it's useful because we are able to draw a line under the past. We say that modern Japan is different from past Japan. We praise Japanese efforts through the use of very carefully directed foreign aid in order to build up other countries in the world. We praise Japan's actions of cooperating with peacekeeping forces by providing potential assistance in being able to prove a new era of peace. But we say it's fundamentally difficult for Japan to be able to project the force the way we would want to when the sixth constitutional amendment stays on the table. We welcome debate over that subject, but it is necessary if we are going to have that discussion to draw a line fundamentally from the ideology of the past and say that that ideology cannot be acceptable in modern Japan. That is only possible if within the domestic sphere, whether in the school textbooks or whether by means of public apology by the Japanese government, we make it clear to the population that that kind of ideology is not acceptable and is not the kind of thing that will characterize the modern Japanese army.
Are Japanese attitudes entirely controlled by the Japanese governments, or they deeply ingrained in the public consciousness?
So you have to say that again.
Are Japanese attitudes purely controlled by what the Japanese government says, or are they deeply ingrained in the public consciousness?
Well, we think attitudes are to some extent fungible. Obviously, they're responsive to wider changes in attitudes within culture. We think the school textbooks probably have a necessary causal relationship between what attitudes the population has. We think to some extent the message the government gives us has a causal relationship. We think under the status quo, the problem is the government has failed to accept any culpability for the action during World War II. That's normal. So, we accept there might be a small minority who do not accept this, but we'll be able to say to that small minority, you do not represent modern Japan, as opposed to the status quo, where we say those people are entirely representative and in fact shouldn't have agrees with them rather than no, thank you. So what do we say? Sorry, so what do we say in terms of the geopolitical? So I've already discussed Japan's actions within the world more generally in terms of peacekeeping. But let's talk very specifically about the Asia-Pacific regions, because we say that Japan is a crucial ally for America's attempt at an Asian pivot. Why is this Asian pivot so necessary? Because you are seeking the rise of an increasingly belligerent China. China appears to have moved on from its notion of peaceful rise, as you see of the brinkmanship of the Canterbury A Islands. Now that is significantly problematized by the fact that any attempt at Japanese, South Korean, Filipino cooperation is immediately hit by China by pointing out that Japan has failed to accept moral culpability for atrocities such as the rape of Nanking. We say that creates an unnegotiable obstacle in terms of coexistence.
Okay, so if Hirohito uses a valid divine mandate in a totalitarian way, oppress everyone and force soldiers to fly like planes into ships, how can you claim that these soldiers bought into it?
But that's the thing, Hirohito wasn't steering the process. Like, when I buy into an ideology, I am the agent of that ideology. We say it's problematic that each of the individuals necessarily fighting within the Japanese Defense Forces accepted this ideology, but by accepting that ideology, they have to accept the culpability that came with it. From their point of view, it was immaterial which of them was committing rape in Nanking. It was in fact all of them were committing rape in Nanking. They don't necessarily say the moral culpability follows well. Finally, what do we say in terms of resolving Sakaki Island disputes? Because it is impossible to achieve cooperation when this is still on the table, it is necessary that Japan very, very publicly distances itself and blames its soldiers for those morally unacceptable actions. Only by doing that can it form natural alliances with key allies in the region, such as South Korea. So when China engages in brinkmanship, such as you see by the expansion of the zones of control around the Sakaki Islands into South Korean and Japanese waters, it is possible for those key allies to cooperate and achieve their mutual strategic goals and the goals of the West generally within that region. We are very happy.